the safety that comes from knowing that a guy is on board with Faith is amazing, because I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, then I can trust that like we're submitted to the same values, like we're submitted to the same set of rules and standards, and there's so much trust that comes from like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen in 10 years to the society, but I know that if this person's submitted to the word now, most likely they're going to be submitted in 10 years. So
yeah.
Hello and welcome to the Christians Who Date podcast. I'm Andrea Alley, and I'm here with only one of my best friends.
Hey, you can at least be half excited that half of you is here.
I'm sorry. I am really excited to be here with Lauren.
But bittersweet.
Bittersweet. Because
we
where's
kicked Callie off the podcast. Just kidding.
Callie, actually, sorry, we haven't told you yet. This has been our plan all along.
Oh my gosh, Trey. Trey, you're like into the microphone. No,
Callie likes that kind of humor.
She does like that dark humor. Okay, for real. Callie has a sickness. No, I'm joking.
Oh my gosh.
I was like trying to say something that wouldn't offend people.
I was like, we already offended everyone.
I was like, wait, okay, Dre, what's going on?
Callie is driving to Helena. She maybe is already there because her brother is visiting from overseas. So it's kind of like a, doesn't come around opportunity very often for her to get to hang out with her older brother. So we have blessed her. We've commissioned her to go.
Yeah, it's true. And it was a hard decision for us to be like, are we going to do a podcast without Callie? But we'll allow it this once. Just this once, Callie. We know you're going to be listening to this.
Yeah. Well, we were like, now you guys get to hear what we really think about Callie.
So
we're
Dre,
just going to talk about her.
Yeah, I'm going to tell you some things I think about Callie.
Yeah.
Callie's one of my favorite humans.
I was going to say, the truth is we're obsessed with her.
But don't let it get to her head. That's why we don't talk about it too much.
We actually talk about, we talk about her like to her face. It's like actually a lower level than how we really feel, because we don't want it to go to her head.
Behind her back, she's probably the coolest person I know.
Behind her back, I'm taking notes whenever Callie speaks.
Dang it. She's like too good to be true.
No, truly. Yeah. I love that girl. I miss her all the time.
Her fashion, everything. She's so chill.
My one complaint about Callie right now is that she doesn't hang out with me as much since we don't live in the same state.
Oh my gosh. You moved first.
I know. I did this to myself.
I know. We've overall always lived apart in our friendship, so we kind of just like
we just make it work.
Yeah, we make it work. We just call each other and we're like, "What's up? What's up?"
But I am really thankful for the 6 months and the 1 year that we did live together.
Hey, we've done long distance.
They were beautiful.
Like 12 years, and we're doing great. We're just trucking along.
It's true. So. Yeah. I didn't know if Callie and my friendship would make it long distance like ours, but it's making it so far, thankfully.
I actually have always had a long distance relationship with Callie, now that I think about it.
That's true. You've never been friends with her in person. Wait, that's terrible.
But like, I've never lived in the same city as her, which is so weird now that I think about it. Whoa.
Wait, okay, I feel like you know this. The podcast doesn't know this. Callie knows this. I literally had to have a moment with Callie where I like told her like, you know what, after Lauren moved away, I really didn't think I was gonna have another best friend. Like I literally like, I'm kind of just like that. I'm just like, oh, somebody's in my best friend spot. Like, that's it. Nobody can replace them. I can be kind of like that.
Yeah.
But I was like,
course,
but then you came along.
Callie replaced me?
No, I just added another one. It's like when you have multiple kids, like you just the love in your heart just like multiplies.
That actually makes sense. I'm like your firstborn. Okay. I get it.
But it was just so funny because I literally had to have a moment where I told her, like, you actually made it into the best friend spot. And I didn't think you would because Lauren was there.
That's what I love. Andrea. So I'm like at first best friends with everybody. And then slowly, like, there's like the few that actually are. And then Dre, it's like no one's close with her. And then there's just a few that make it in. That's how we're opposites.
Yep, it's true. Yeah. Yeah. So it was kind of funny because, yeah, Lauren definitely made me feel instantly close to her right away. But then I realized everyone feels this way. And then I just like hung on.
Yeah. She hung on for dear life. That's how we know she's a competitor.
Yeah. That's right.
So, but wait, I do want to say something slightly off topic, but we didn't even know if we'd have the pod tonight because Dre yesterday was like, I don't feel well. I have 100 degree 0.225 fever. And I had talked to her 2 days ago and I heard her voice and I was like, I mean, we're pretty blunt at this point with this friendship. And I was like, you don't sound good at all. Like, you don't sound good. And you're like,
I like how I got like a Southern old lady accent
when
I was talking about my fever.
You did. You're like, I'm sick.
It was 2 days ago. It wasn't yesterday.
Well, yesterday I called you to check in.
Oh, yeah. That's true. Yeah. You did. Yeah.
Make sure you're alive.
You sound good. You don't sound like a 90-year-old Southern lady.
Yeah, that's how you sounded. So here we are. How you feeling now?
I feel better today. Honestly, yesterday, like just being feverish, that's when I'm like the worst. I'm just
You're a little like brazen, little baby.
Yeah. I am a little worried because I feel like I get more unfiltered when I'm sick. So hopefully nothing crazy comes out on this podcast. But
it'll be fine. You can bleep it out if you need to, or just let people listen.
Or just let them listen. Just leave it all out there.
Let them know. The older we get, the more we're like, whatever. Like, what do we got to lose? Literally nothing. Nothing.
Without the youngin' holding us back, it was just gonna
be Kelly never holds us back. She does keep us centered, probably.
Probably, yeah. It keeps us grounded.
So, we'll see what happens.
How was your workout today?
Oh, it was good. I was blow drying my hair before this.
Were you really?
Yeah.
I thought you were joking about that.
No, I wasn't. I was literally blow drying my hair. I was like, hey, I'll be there. Because I literally just got back running and then I had like 10, 12 minutes to spare before we were going to meet. And I made my decaf coffee and I showered, blow dried my hair, put on even a little mascara.
Nice.
No one can even see these things. But it was funny during my run today. I got encouraged / hit on by maybe a woman. I think we're encouraged. I'm going to believe.
Yeah, I know. But I hate that you don't always know anymore.
You don't know these days. And it seemed like it was kind of like a woman like, yeah, go girl. But I'm trying to be a little bit friendlier to people when I run because I usually do not look at people and I like just am not nice. Not that I'm not nice. I just don't look at people because I'm like, I don't want anyone to think I'm like trying to hit on them or whatever. Which is funny because then I'll talk to people at the stores. So whatever. So I was running and I get eye contact with this like older lady and she goes, nice body in front of like all these people. And I was like, I don't know what to do. So I just go like a little fist pump. And I was like, wow, I don't get that type of shout from guys, but I'll get it from like an older lady in her 50s. Real excited about my nice body.
She's just really into body positivity right now.
Body positivity. And I was like, thank you for the shout. So
also that is one of your like go-tos, like if in any scenario that you don't know what to do or like how to respond, the fist is one of them.
I'll do a fist pump.
Yeah, fist pump in the air is definitely one of the Lauren responses.
No, 1,000%. Because I'm like, I don't know what you want me to do. Like, hi, thank you so much. Like, why? Why do you think I have a nice body? So I just kept running. But it's funny. We were talking about this earlier. I was running with a friend. Speaking of, people putting themselves out there, I have a good friend I run with and she's so friendly to everybody. That's just who she is. She says hi to every single person we pass. Like, I thought I was like extroverted and sweet and evangelistic. No, that woman is like to another T.
Wow. Yeah.
Always saying hi.
Wrap my mind around this.
I know. And I'm like, wow, props to you. So I feel like I'm mean compared to her. So we were running a couple weeks ago and I just like saw her after like a loop because she was running way ahead of me. she then comes my way with this really tall, good-looking man, and they were talking and running. So I just was like, oh my goodness, like what is happening here? So I just was like, see you in 3 miles. Like, I'm not even going to talk to them because I was like, I want to leave them alone so they can chit chat more.
Yeah.
Whatever this cute meat thing is going on here. And I was like pretending like, I don't care. Like, I'm just gonna run. So I was like, way to go, friend. So she told me afterwards, they ran for over 3 miles together, that she just like randomly passed him and waved and then was like, how many, like, are you training for something? And then he started talking, they started talking, and they ran for 3 miles talking. And then at the end, she was like, hey, if you ever like want to go on a run together sometime. And he was like, yeah, I'm down. And so he got her number. So they texted throughout the week. And then they actually went on a date instead.
Wow.
The next week. So I was really impressed with my friend for just being friendly and like chit-chatting with a cute guy. And that's just her personality.
Meeting a man out in the wild.
But she was open, which I think was, I'm not as in an open stage, but I was like, way to go. Like, that's legit. So
yeah. You have been in that stage before.
I've met people in the wild, but yeah. So I was like, way to go for my friend putting themselves out there like that. Yeah. So I loved it. And they got a date out of it.
We're so proud. We were like cheering over the group text, like, yes, testimony.
Like, yeah, we need those testimonies.
Yeah, we love it.
Yeah. Well, Dre, should we get into the podcast of something we could talk about forever?
Yeah, let's talk about it. Yeah, we had to. Lauren and I just have so many stories, like, of us just dating out in the wild. So
totally. Dating as Christians.
It's Christians who date, for sure. Yeah, so Lauren brought up this topic and I was like, this is great. I feel like it's one that we've like kind of hovered around. Like, we're like, in the future we should talk about this. But
yes,
basically, especially when you're kind of meeting people out in the wild or like not at church, but even inside of church, and then dating apps, like it brings in all these possibilities of like people and their worldview and their values and all of those things. And so we wanted to talk about like, how do you bring up faith? How do you bring up your spirituality? How do you bring up your walk with God in a way that it doesn't feel like you're, like interrogating them? Like, when's the last time you went to church? Like, how many times a day do you pray? Like, and also a way that doesn't feel like super intense, even though it is a subject like we have both had intense conversations about in the past. Like, for sure, we've gone there, but that doesn't mean that like, 1, 2, 3 dates in, it needs to be like a really intense conversation. Like, we all bring it up. I mean, a lot of times I'll bring it up first date or second date. Like, I at least start putting the feelers out in the first date. So we just wanted to give you some strategies for how you can naturally bring this up. And honestly, you might be able to take this into like work conversations or, just like friendships. If you're like, you know what, I want to talk about my faith more. I will say we have an expert on our hands because Lauren is one of the most natural people. Like, she's a natural evangelist. She's very natural at talking about faith. So just get excited. Get your notepad out because Lauren is really good at this. So,
oh gosh,
yeah. Why don't you kick us off? Actually,
yeah. Well, Dre and I have definitely because Jesus is the most important thing. Obviously, we started a podcast on Christians who date. Like, so this is definitely the topic that we're talking about today. But we're also talking about like how theology is a big part of like our faith is a part of us every day, like our belief, and that is something that we're just like. I mean, it's been ingrained in us since we're little. Like, whoever we date, marry, we want to share that same value with, and because it's important. It's your worldview. It's how you view the world. It's how you live. It's how you treat others. Like, I think of the scripture like, love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, body, soul, and then love your neighbor as yourself. Like, I live by those. Like, how do I love God with all of my being? How do I love my neighbor? And that means like, how do I love the person that I'm dating? Like, how and I'm getting to know. And we also know like whoever you date, that's like a very special spot in your life. Like that is a very important. They are the people that the person, not the people, but the person that gets to know you the best and you're sharing like romance with and intimacy. So it's just like a big deal. And but the thing is I early on when I started dating, I would say like high school and college, I made it to be really intense. Like I didn't know anything about dating. And I was just like, they have to love Jesus so much and they have to be on fire for God, whatever that means now. And I just had this high standard of like, they need to look exactly like I do in their spirituality, or even in Christian world, it's like they got to be the spiritual leader and they have to look a certain way, like the pastor type, like you got to be with a pastor. I feel like a lot of people would tell me that. Because, faith is a big part of who I am and I express that. And so I think I just came into dating very intensely of like, if they're not going to be a missionary or telling every other person about Jesus, then they're not good enough type of thing, which is just kind of so crazy to me because it dismissed all these incredible people and like parts of a person just because I needed their spirituality to look like a certain way. So I feel like it was like just an immature part of me that didn't understand like, oh, people are really complex. I'm complex. And you have to take time to unravel to get to know a person. Like you're not going to know in like one or two hangouts like who a person is. It's like there's so many nuances to us. And so I think that's something, and we can get more into different stories, but I think through dating, I learned how to navigate theology, how to navigate faith, and like, okay, what's actually I really, really want or need in a healthy relationship that shares like Jesus. And so, yeah, I don't know. What about you, Dre?
Yeah, I know. I was trying to think about that because I feel like I definitely had in my head, like, oh, I want someone who's really on fire for Jesus. But I don't know if I had like as much of a intense picture just because when my mom met my dad, he was like kind of a backslidden Baptist. And he's been like the most steady like man. And I mean, and he definitely like he went to church with her and, had his own like experiences with Jesus that gave her like the confidence that like, okay, this man like really loves the Lord, but it looked totally different from what she, maybe thought. And so I think, and then, so I don't know, I do think your parents' story a little bit like can influence like maybe your picture of what things will look like, I guess. So yeah, I don't feel like I felt like, oh, he's definitely going to look this way. But yeah, I do remember like really wanting someone who like loved the Lord. And yeah, I'm trying to think because the other thing I always think about is like I don't know, this might be jumping ahead a little bit, but
Go for it. Let's try.
I think about how you and I did YWAM and we did ministry school and like
we're super spiritual.
Painting the picture of how spiritual we are. But
we know a lot about God, which like we don't.
All I was going to say was, unfortunately, a lot of people who did those things with us, like, aren't necessarily following the Lord anymore.
Yeah,
or
it
like
depends. Some are, some aren't.
Some are, some aren't. But it's
mixed
like
bag.
it's just kind of a mixed bag. Like, and so it's not necessarily a guarantee. Like, somebody like looks super fiery during one season and maybe they're like evangelizing up a wall and they're standing up in the mission field like preaching in the middle of the town square, like like that's amazing. Like I'm glad people like have those moments, but it's just interesting because sometimes you have to look at like what's the real fruit of their lives, because sometimes people know how to follow all the rules and look like they're really fiery, but like looking at the actual fruit of their lives, like how do people experience them in relationships? And it just, I don't know, it's not a guarantee. And so it's really like, God, okay, I see the outside, but like you see the heart. Like what's the heart, So
1000%. That's the hard thing, is like you really can't you can't control the future. Like what you see is what you know, and you have to kind of follow God, French community. I was actually just hearing a story from a friend of these two people I know that he is a pastor at the church, and they met, and they both had the same like theology when they met. They got married pretty soon, and I guess she more has now turned away from God. They're still married, but he's still he moved away from being a pastor at that church because she wasn't going to church anymore with him. And so I don't know where he's at now, but like they were both on the same page when married, and then she, through different circumstances, decided to basically turn away from her faith. And that's really hard. Like, so there's just not guarantees like what's going to happen. Right. But at the same time, you're just like, okay, well, this is like where I'm at. And my hope is that we're both going, you know, towards Jesus in this relationship and all that. And there's a lot of relationships where then they come to know Jesus in their marriage or their dating, or like your dad, it sounds like during dating your mom, there was some components of faith that grew.
Yeah. And I think she could see that he was a steady, like faithful, loyal, like just, and he had integrity, you know, and like he followed through on what he said he was going to do and things like that. So it's just, I don't know. It's just, I think there's certain personalities that can look really spiritual, and then there's people who are just being faithful, and you might not see them. Like you might overlook them. They might get overlooked in a lot of spiritual environments, but actually they're like plugging away. Like that's my dad in a lot of ways. Totally. And it's so anyway, it's I think Lauren's right. Like you can't eliminate risk altogether. Like you just kind of do your best. But I do think you look at like, what's this person's character? Like not just like, are they good at playing by the rules of Christianity? Yes. But like, what's their actual character? Yeah.
No, that's really good, Dre, because, and we can go into like more specifics of like what we look for, but I feel like, well, we're seeing this a lot in the church. Like people are getting exposed left and right that like they look good on the outside, but their heart is rotten.
Yeah.
And people like will leave the church, you know, because of pastors who have just fallen away from God, or they're corrupt or doing things. And so it is true. Like we want to look for the people that have character when we're dating. And I think I think I had this idea of like, I want someone who's really outwardly expressive in their faith. And I think the older I get, the more I date, and I still, you know, I'm not married. And I think in a way, God's maybe protected me because I like really liked the I call them charismatic, but like really like outwardly Christian guys. And now I'm like, oh, I'm looking for someone who like is just faithful to God, faithful to their community. Who are like are steady, and they're living out this life of loving God and loving others, but it's not like it's to be seen. Like there's a humility and there's like a depth there, where I have dated guys, and you've seen me date guys that I'm like, oh, I call them like the shiny Christians. Like they're very likable, they're very outward, but in the inward daily relationship of us dating, it wasn't all beautiful. It wasn't all good. It wasn't like the relationship I needed for a long-term life. And that's why we're not dating, you know? And so it's just interesting, like what we think we need or want when it comes to someone who's Christian or shares that same faith with us, but it might not be on the daily playing out that is like what you actually are really wanting or really needing. So
yeah, for sure. And sometimes it's that compatibility factor where you're like, I don't even know if it's necessarily a character issue. Like we just aren't compatible.
We're not
there's
compatible.
Not attraction, or
we both love Jesus, but that doesn't mean we need a Mac. Make out. If you're wondering what Mac meant. To clarify, Mac is make out. So Andrea, I would love to hear like how you go about talking about theology in your dating, because it's going to be different with every single guy, but what are some things that you've done? Because I mean, for me personally, as one of your besties, I laugh. Like Dre to me is a dating theologian. She's like, okay, on this date, I'm going to talk
We talked
to this.
about the Trinity.
I'm going to talk to this guy about the Trinity. I'm going to talk to this guy about like what he believes like roles of men and women are. Or like, okay, on this date, I'm going to talk to this guy about the Holy Spirit. And I'm like, this woman is a freaking theologian. Like, who talks like this? But it's because it's something you value so much. And it's always different with every guy of like what you're needing to know and be aware of in this dating relationship. So yeah, what are some things that you've done to grow in talking about theology?
Yeah, I mean, maybe it's like partly a problem of mine that I'm like hyper aware of it. Like they can say like
it's what you value.
Yeah, they can say the smallest thing and I'm like, "Oh, I bet they're this." Like I bet they're this denomination or whatever. Which is a blessing and a curse. But anyway, I'm like I could almost tell from their like dating profile what theology
for online.
Yeah. But a lot of times I'll just wait for it to come up naturally because I don't want to like in the beginning, my main question is this a fun person to talk to?
Yes.
Like, am I enjoying their company? Because bottom line, if you're not enjoying their company, like there's no point in doing this process with them at all. You know,
Agreed.
like if you don't enjoy each other. So that's the first question you need to be asking. And once it's like, okay, we can have a good conversation. Like I'll have a whole phone conversation and church comes up pretty naturally for me most of the time. Like if someone's like, what did you do this week? Or what have you been up to this week? Or what are your plans for this weekend? Like those are pretty common questions, I feel like. And I'll be like, blah, 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 church on Sunday. Or like I'm a youth leader. So I'll be like, yeah, I went to church on Wednesday night because I'm a youth leader. Like, I'll just kind of slip it in. It's just part of my life. And so I'll talk about it because I'm talking about my life,
yeah,
right?
You're not like, I did my devotional this morning for 30 minutes.
This morning, as I was reading in Leviticus. Lord, I've been stuck in Leviticus for.
Oh, gosh, get me out, God. Get me out.
I finally got into Numbers. But anyway.
Freaking Old Testament. Anyways.
What was I going to say? Oh, yeah. So it comes up pretty naturally. Yeah. Without me having to be like, I was travailing this morning for an hour in the prayer room, you know.
Which she was.
Whatever. No. But yeah. And then so a lot of times, like if a guy is also like that, he'll get excited about that because he's looking for someone that is involved in their church and likes going to church. And so he'll start to ask more questions about it. When a guy doesn't start to ask more questions about it, it's not like I automatically write him off. I kind of like, honestly, if I throw stuff out there like that on the phone call or the first date and he doesn't pick up on it, I usually let it lie. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll have to ask him more directly on the second date. But I don't like press like, you're going to talk to me about this on the first date. Like,
we're not going on another one.
Yeah, I just kind of let the conversation go there. A lot of times it goes there naturally. If it doesn't, then I'm like, okay, second date, I do want to bring it up. So I'm going to bring it up more directly. But a lot of times even that will look like, it'll be like, what does faith look like for you? Or like, are you, like churches, if I'm talking about church again, which I usually am, because I'll be like, oh yeah, church, blah, 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 and then we did this. If I'm just giving them an update on my weekend, and then I'll be like, so what did you do? Like, is church part of your life? Like, is this something
question.
that,
it's super easy. That's an easy one. Just like, oh, do you go to church? Like,
right, yeah.
That literally will open up so many That you could ask to anybody. Oh, do you go to church? Because then they'll be like, no. Or like, oh, I do, but I go to this one, or I don't because of this.
Or I think I've asked, like, did you grow up in church at all? Or like, do you have a background? Yeah. Just kind of,
super easy.
Yeah. What about you, Lauren? How do you bring it up?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it depends. I was thinking about the array of different people throughout the years.
I know. I'm like the wheels are turning for me too. I'm like,
well, some of them were at my church or some of them were like at ministry school. So we kind of like, we already were maybe on the same page of like, okay, I know you love Jesus. I know that you're like involved in your church. But then it was more asking like deeper questions as we went about dating of like, okay, what does your relationship with Jesus look like? Or what does spending time with God look like for you? Or like, where do you feel like God's called you in your life? Like, what do you hope to do to impact, the world? And so it felt like they were like really cool, deep questions that I got to have conversations of like how God was speaking to them or all that. And then I think when I got more into online dating or dating people that I wasn't sure like where they were spiritually, I was very careful like you of just like, hey, I don't want that to be like the first thing where they feel like I'm going to ride you off immediately if I don't know exactly what you believe theologically, because honestly, I would hate someone to do that to me. Like just because I don't have the exact theology they do or beliefs, then they're just gonna be like, oh, I'm not gonna go on a date with Lauren, because she's not this. Because I've
Or
had guys
I would
do that.
Yeah, and sorry to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. We're back and forth.
I was just gonna say, I would hope that if there was something a guy really wanted to know, that he would directly ask me and not just be like, well, she didn't bring it up or she didn't respond the way that I wanted her to.
It's honestly goes back to don't make assumptions. Like don't assume like everything about what a person believes, like or thinks or does. And I think probably because I had quite a few guys, especially through online dating, I would have Christian, they would have Christian. We start to talk and they'd imagine, I'm more on the charismatic side. Well, then they made all these assumptions about who I am, like, of just like what I believe. And I was like, oh, that feels really yucky to just be pigeonholed into like, this is who you are. I don't want anything to do with you. So I think that's where I started to realize I'm not going to do that to the guys that I'm talking to and dating. I'm going to give them space to express themselves and like share who they are. And I've grown in that. And of course, there's a point where you're like, I've had to be pretty upfront, like, hey, this is how I live out my faith. Like, how do you live out your faith? Like, what does that look like? And, there was a guy that I dated recently that was not living out their faith, but they were like, but I want to, like, I want what you have. Like, I want to live that. And I was like, well, let's explore that together. Instead of immediately being like, well, nope, because you haven't the past 20 years like me,
Right.
And just realizing like, well, God like kind of invites us into these journeys with people's faith. Everyone's on a faith journey, whether they know it or not. And yeah, like there's enough here for us to see like maybe something could happen. And so I don't know, just like exploring that with people. But I mean, Dre, like I come from a family and I love my family, but they're like, he needs to be the most spiritual person or he's not worthy. And it's like, I just don't think it's that black and white, probably. That's just who I am. And I like to push the buttons of like how Christianity is just like, it needs to look like this, or, they're not good enough. And I'm like, I think we're just way more complex than that.
Right. Well, because you've dated those guys. You've dated those guys that checked off all the boxes.
Super spiritual guys. Yeah.
And it wasn't like an automatic win. Yeah.
So again, and that doesn't mean I don't personally, I will not date someone who doesn't love Jesus, or like is going after God, just because that's such a huge worldview. It's like how everything I do operates around like who Jesus is and following God and through that lens of love. But that doesn't mean that like they have to exactly have the exact same way they live out their life in relationship with Jesus as me. Like that's crazy. So yeah, I don't know. What do you think, Dre?
Well, I was going to say too, I feel like something we've talked about before is we just hate like when dating gets really transactional. Like,
yes,
we don't like that at all. Like it's just not fun to be on the other end of that.
Yeah.
And so I feel like the older I get and the more I'm just kind of like, I don't really know where this journey is going to go, honestly. Like, I just kind of look at it like, okay, every person I go on a date with, I believe that God is connecting me to that person for a reason. Like, I believe that he's behind it. I believe he's sovereign over it. And so I'm going to take this opportunity to like love the person in front of me and talk about faith. Because what if I'm the only person they talk about Jesus with, like what if that's the way that it happens? Like I'm like, I want to humanize the person in front of me and believe that like we're here for a purpose. I don't know if it's, you know, marriage or if it's just to have like some good conversations or whatever. But yeah, I think really like being curious about someone's story and not just immediately putting them into a box based on like a couple answers to your questions, you know, like really trying to dig in and understand who they are. And you know, and if you don't enjoy it, or if you come to, it's like I've come to dead ends before where they're literally like, you know, I'm agnostic or I'm atheist or whatever, but even then I don't necessarily like just cut off, you know, like relationship with them. I'm kind of just like, okay, well, the dating door is closed. But like, you don't have to never talk to me again, because like I hope that they would feel like
you're the worst human because you don't have the same belief as me. It's like, no, these are humans on a journey. Like, who knows like who's going to meet Jesus or like be touched by God through that like relationship. I think where it gets tricky is there is more and more. I mean, I have a handful of friends who are now dating guys who don't want Jesus, don't want to go be a part of the church, and they love Jesus. The woman loves Jesus, the guy doesn't, and they're kind of like, "What? He's great. We're compatible, whatever." And I was like, "Yeah, I think it depends of like, okay, yeah, that's fun, but like you kind of have to then start to think about the future." And so I think there is a point where it's like, yeah, there's a time for dating, and then there's a time to realize like, is this someone I want to build a family with and a life with and a future with? And is this who I want to raise my kids with if we get the privilege of having kids? To spend my everyday in close proximity. If Jesus is really what's most important to you, then you do want someone that's going to value Jesus the most as you do, because that's like how you're living your life. Now, if you're like, Jesus is kind of a thing, you know, for both of us, then I guess you could make that work. But it just depends where your relationship with God is priority. I get that. I hate the phrase this is me, like equally unequally yoked. Like that makes me cringe because I think it just
it's
really
from the
like
Bible, Lauren.
I know, but they're like, you gotta be equally yoked. I'm like, I don't know, that just sounds so cringy, because I think it's just like, well, if they're a Christian, then okay, you guys can get married. I'm like, what if they're a Christian that like is addicted to porn and like has affairs? Like, does that make you guys equally yoked? You know? So I think there's just, again, there's layers there, but
it's more the way the church has taken that concept and filled in a lot of things that are like, is that really what it means?
Yeah, exactly. And so I get why people like are like, well, he's a good guy, even though he doesn't love Jesus. And I do have to, I think you have to go back to like, what type of life do you want? What type of family do you want? How do you want your, you know, who do you want your best friend that you're going to live with every day? What do you want to talk about? Where do you want to spend your time and your thoughts and your efforts? And so,
yeah, no, for sure. I think like I can't even emphasize enough. Forever is a really long time. And I knew that before, but like the first relationship I was in where I was actually trying to think about like, okay, could we get married? Trying to wrap my mind around forever is a long time was just, it was mind blowing to me. But it's like, that's a huge thing, like that you would have to lay down forever. Like it's, you know, and it's like, you know, I guess God can do anything, but like marrying someone that you hope like will change in that drastic of a way is just that I couldn't do it. Like,
yeah, because you can't change someone's heart. You can't change someone's faith. You can impact it, you can influence it, but you don't want to go into a relationship trying to manipulate them into believing something. Like, it will not go well. Like, it will not go well. So
and
it
I
has
just
to be on there.
remember.
Go ahead.
Sorry, no, go ahead.
No, that's it.
Well, I just remember thinking like, what I like, do I trust this person to raise my kids? Like, do I trust that? And we were actually both Christian, but we are just like our view of life and our values and just a lot of the way that we looked at things and our vision was just different. And so it was, just those questions like, okay, I'm going to raise kids with someone. Like, this is going to be the person that like is instilling values in them and is teaching them, like Lauren said, like how to look at the world. So
and this is further down the relationship road of what Dre and I are right now talking about.
Yeah.
This
but
isn't like date 3.
Right. But this is the reason that you really need someone who's on board with faith. Like, because,
Yes.
well, and the safety that comes from knowing that a guy is on board with faith is amazing, because I'm like, oh my gosh, okay, then I can trust that, like, we're submitted to the same values. Like, we're submitted to the same set of rules and standards. And, like, let's say in 10 years, everyone thinks that polygamy or like polyamory, whatever is coming out,
is good to go.
Is good to go. Like, I know that this person, like, unless they go crazy, like, I know that they're going to be tied to these same values. So there's so much trust that comes from, like, okay, I don't know what's going to happen in 10 years to the society, but I know that if this person's submitted to the word now, most likely they're going to be submitted in 10 years. So
I think that's really good. It's just like, it literally is just like a better guarantee of like, okay, we're both going to be on the same page here with different things. And like, to be able to share something that's like the most intimate part of you, which is your faith and your spirituality, with the person that you live your life with, is just such a sweet gift. And I mean, I've dated people that don't have a very close relationship with Jesus, and it was sad at times. I was like, oh, I don't get to share these parts of my heart that I really want to share. And I share with my girlfriends, which is great, with my family. But I was like, oh, this is the person I like really love and romantically I'm connected to. Like, I wish I could share this, but I can't force this because it has to be like their own as well. Like, I can talk about it, but there's something powerful when it's like, oh, we both are going after this. We both want this relationship with God. Like, we both, like, it's so attractive. It's so sweet and really, really cool. And so, yeah, being a Christian's cool. So,
I felt that too, though, where I'm like, they don't fully know me. Like, they know a lot of me, but they don't know this, like, thing that honestly, like, is the lens that I look at everything else through.
Yeah, definitely. So it's important. It's a big deal, but let's talk a little bit. I know this is getting more nitty gritty, but I think it's interesting. Okay, so Dre and I like have dated Christian guys, but have maybe still very drastic different theology within Christianity. So that has been sometimes a pinpoint for both Dre and me of like the guys that we date, or it's created guys not wanting to date us because of like even how we live out Christianity, which is like another wild thing. Cause you're like, what? We're both Christians. Like, why can't it work? Like, what the heck?
We've had that exact conversation.
And it's actually really sad, I think, because it's like, you love Jesus, I love Jesus, but the way you live out your relationship with Jesus and the church and the world is really different than the way I live out my relationship with Jesus and the world. So we actually can't date. So that's a bum. It's really sad. I'd love to hear a little bit how you've navigated that.
Yeah, for sure. It is a bummer because I always go in thinking the same thing. I'm like, I've done it. I have found someone who loves Jesus. Like, we're good to go, And then you're like, dang it. Actually, there's still doesn't always work necessarily. And I think what it usually boils down to is, can we see ourselves at the same church? And I feel like I'm pretty flexible on
Andrea's very flexible.
What kind of church I can go to. I just really need somewhere, I do need somewhere with some charismatic bent, but there's a lot of churches that are like that. And mostly it's like the worship experience is just like, that's like the main place I connect with God. And so anyway, but there's like some theological, if we like really wanted to break it down, things where I'm just like, I just agree with a lot of charismatic theology more. And it's not that there's other ones where I'm like, okay, I could kind of see that. But I think what I've run into is if there's there are some more, I don't know, sections of Christian theology that are very serious about what they believe, and they they just believe that they are absolutely right. And there's some stuff that like I get like the Apostles' Creed, that kind of stuff. Like, okay, we all have to agree on that, right? Like that is stuff that like you kind of have to like draw the line on. But there's a lot that we don't necessarily like for sure know. We're just doing our best to figure out like based on what scripture says. And so when they hold one of those issues, like, no, if you don't believe it this way, you're wrong.
Yes,
That's really
it's
hard
really
for me. I can't do it. I'm like, you have to, I'm like, what if like you're wrong? And what if like, cause the church is split on this. So it's not like it's like 10% of the church believes my way and 90% of it believes yours. Like, it's like, no, it's like, we're pretty even. So I can't like, if somebody looks down on the way that I believe when it's not super clear and it's like you can see across the board the church has been debating these topics for years, like it's just like that's so frustrating to me. And so I realized like, oh, I actually won't be able to go to a church where the leaders are like that because I can't submit like inwardly in my heart. Like I would have such a hard time submitting to a leader that is like all your friends are wrong in the charismatic church, like I'm just like, I don't think that that's true. Like it's just, I don't know. I think I could submit to a leader who's like, you know what, I believe this way, but it could be this. Like, I don't know. Yeah. So that's kind of what it's come down to for me is like, could we see ourselves at the same church? And to me, that means like we're submitting to like the pastors, the leaders, like this, of that church. Like we have like maybe even couples within that church that we could both see as mentors. Like
I love that.
We have community, like mutual community at this church. Like there's so much that comes from church. Like it's a big deal. So you really do.
It's like it's community, family, accountability. It's like you said, you spend 2 times of your week there and then even maybe some other parts of the week. So it's like you're part of your rhythm, like me going to the gym, like this is like a part of your lifestyle. So you're like, can you join this lifestyle that I have or not? Because that's going to be a part of where I spend a lot of my time.
Yeah. And I even realized, this is the last thing I'll say, is like when we ran into an issue that we really needed to pull in some like mentors to help us with, I didn't want him to go to his church because I didn't trust them. And he didn't want to go to mine because he didn't trust.
This is a specific relationship.
Yeah, this is like a specific relationship. Yeah. And so that was another thing, was like, can you guys find a place where you trust the leadership enough to like speak into your life if an issue comes up? Because I was like, I don't trust what they would even tell you on this. So that's, those are some things that I honestly didn't even see coming when it came to that topic. Like I was like, wow, I did not realize all this encompasses, I guess.
Some thoughts of what you said. I was just thinking of like a story that was one that, okay, this is like an extreme, but there was a guy I was talking to on Hinge and we did a phone call out of your recommendation. No, it was before you said that, but I'm glad we did. And he just like went at me about my theology. Like almost it felt like attacking. So we got into like a theological debate our first phone call.
Wow.
Where I'm
so proud.
It was just like, but the thing that I realized that was really hard for me is he was so dogmatic and so either you believe exactly what I believe to the T, or we will not ever have a date. And it was like, so immediately my defenses are up and I'm like, oh my goodness, like there's no room to just like get to know each other. And so it was like automatically not fun. And some of the things were kind of laughable, but he got into this whole thing about like, you will be a stay-at-home mom, which I'm not against that. But he's like, you will be a stay-at-home mom and you will breastfeed your children. It's really bad if you bottle feed your children. And I'm like, first of all, has nothing to do, I think, fully with theology. This is just like this guy's ideas. But like, it was kind of like tied to his theology of like women submitting to men.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, what is happening? Like, how did we even get in this Stop
I was
it.
gonna
Like,
say, I would have been like, how did you get there?
I have no idea. I think he was kind of like, well, what do you believe about women and men? Are you
Oh, so
egalitarian versus
okay. Oh,
complementarian?
he
Which
was like directly
he
asking.
was
Okay.
directly going after, like, what do you think about men and
Okay.
women's roles in the
Wow.
church and in the home, which
Yeah.
some people can get like real spicy about. Like, these are, again, half and half. The church believe different things about like men and
Yep.
women and their roles and all
Yeah.
of that according to a couple scripture passages, blah blah blah.
Yeah.
So I'm just like, I love
Which Lauren will
Jesus.
fully unpack for us in another episode. No,
Another
just kidding.
episode. But I just am like, okay, what I'm looking for is a humble heart. Like, I'm just looking for someone
Yes.
who, so anyways, obviously that conversation, I've never yelled in a conversation, but he was yelling. So I started yelling back and it was just more like aggressive. But I was like
Wow.
literally in an airport and people were watching me because my voice was raised so high.
Oh my gosh.
And he was like, at one point, he's like, I'm not yelling. I'm just passionate. And I was like, no, you're yelling. So anyways, very dramatic, obviously. But like, this is how people can get about theology. And it's like, I'm right, you're wrong. And that is so not our hearts, like, at
Right.
all when it comes to our conversations about God or theology. And I think I'm like, I just want someone who cares about others and cares about God, and that we can share that and have these like beautiful conversations. And so anyways, that's like an extreme thing, but it did happen. And I had a couple other guys on Hinge who automatically would just go at me of like, what do you believe about women and men? What do you believe about this thing in theology?
Yeah.
And it was so pointed that you knew if you say the wrong thing, you're out. And I think that's where you and me have been like, we're not going to approach that way, because like, that's not the type of Christians going to be, period, anyways, like towards anybody. Like,
right.
And I even remember, I was getting to know a guy and we were going on some dates, and he didn't have a Christian. Well, he had like a Catholic background, but he thanked me after a couple conversations. He's like, thank you so much for not throwing your faith at me. Like, it was actually like so enjoyable to like, I felt like I could just be myself and share about like where I'm at, because he was just starting to go back to God and start to read the Bible. And like, he was just like, thank you so much. Like, most Christians would just like shut me down, not even like attempt going on dates with me. And like, they would just, you know, be dogmatic or whatever. And so I was like, it was like the best compliment, because that person is amazing. And it just was like, oh yeah, like I would want someone to be really gentle towards me as I'm like figuring out my faith as well. Because we all are. I've not arrived. Like, that's the thing.
Totally.
And I think people can think like they know everything about God because they grew up in the church or went to a ministry school or whatever. And it's like, we're all on this journey of learning about God. We're not fully ever going to be 100%. I mean, I feel pretty 100% about Jesus being real and about like what he says, but
we believe the Apostles' Creed. Okay, we're gonna attach our statement of beliefs to
I was
this
like,
podcast.
I'm gonna go hundies in. I'm gonna go all in.
Hundies. I'm
hundies in about Jesus.
On Jesus dying on a cross, raising from the dead 3 days later.
Yeah, I know, it sounds crazy, but I'm in. I'm in. He got
Hundies
me.
in.
Hundies in. So, but then yeah, there's a lot of other things that, and it is nice when you have values shared. It's true. Like, there's some big values that I think you and me are both are like, we need this for like how we want to have a marriage and family. But I think in those beginning stages, it's just like, let's just get to know each other and like explore what that looks like lived out. Because who knows what that looks like or how that can change or evolve. So
I was on a date with a guy who actually, we disagreed on a theological issue that felt like, you know, definitely like mid-level, I would say, not like lowest level, not like highest level. But hearing like how he got there and hearing him say like, but at the end of the day, like, I'm submitted to the Bible. Like, he's like, this is my best understanding of what it says. But like, if I'm wrong, like, I'm willing to be wrong. And that's what I needed to hear. Like, I didn't actually need to hear his stance. I needed to hear him say like, but whatever the Bible says, like, I'm in.
Like his posture.
Yes, I needed to hear his posture, because it was like, okay, you know, there's some of these things that it's not like we don't all come to the same like conclusion on them, but I just need to know that you're surrendered to this and you're not just making it say whatever you want it to say, because I need to, like, I'll lay down my life for this. So I need somebody who's going to be right there with me, you know, like, as Lauren and I have, well, it's just funny because you and I have like been that intense in dating conversations before. Like, I will lay down my life.
I'm like, do we tell people on the podcast how intense we are? I mean, I think they know.
Yeah.
They think they know. I'm like, I will die for the gospel. Are you in or out? But I guess
are you hundies in?
Are you hundies in? So yeah, we do get, okay, so we get passionate as well, I guess. But I'm not like yelling at the person to like have their wife be breastfed or breastfeed the kids.
No. You're not yelling at them. You're just saying, I'm just like, saying, this is where I'm at. Yeah.
I'll definitely be passionate about like, I'm going to be this person always, like in my relationship with God.
Yeah.
Are you going to take it or leave it? Yeah, I definitely am that. Like, and I think that's something, you know, we both in our dating relationships have had to kind of say like, okay, this is who I am and I'm not going to change. Like, these are some of my non-negotiables. And that's where there can be tension, because I mean, I want to be with someone who has non-negotiables about their faith. Like, that they're I want Jesus. I want to be a part of a church. I want to be a part of a community. I want to go after God. I'm like, I hope that's your non-negotiable, because those are mine. So when you have that shared ones, but you know, when you're getting to know someone, you kind of have to eventually lay out like, okay, well, this is where I actually, I'm not going to budge. And it's usually like for us, like our areas of faith. So, and then if they're willing to grow in that, great. If they're not and they don't share that, then it's like, okay, yeah, like I guess we can't date.
Right. So yeah.
It's just how you present it.
Yeah, for sure. Presentation
is really key. And I've had some struggle buses sometimes with those ones.
Yeah, it's true.
So,
well, I had one more thought, but do you have any
share your thought and then I'll follow up if needed.
Well, I was just going to say, I liked you had some like questions that you asked to bring things up naturally. So I wanted to just maybe go through and hit those.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. You can, feel free to have your own. But I was like, this is just very practical, like, you know.
If you were on a date or getting to know someone. Yeah.
Yeah. What do you do on Sundays? Some of these we've already brought up.
Some of these are Hinge. Like Hinge says like, what do you do on
Sunday?
No, they do. That's like so easy on your profile.
It's a great one. Yeah.
It's just like, oh, I go to church, brunch. It's just so chill. Then
such a good way to say it. Just tell people you're looking for someone who loves J Stew.
J Stew.
That's what I did.
So
it was a typo for the record if you didn't catch that episode.
Yeah.
Do you go to church? I think we kind of asked, or do you have a church? Do you have a faith background, or do you have a background with church? We've kind of hit that one. Lauren said, what does a relationship with God look like? So what does it mean to you? Because a lot of times people will have Christian on their bios, or maybe they'll mention like that they're a Christian. So you could say, what does being a Christian mean to you? Like, what does that look like to you? Or did you grow up in the church is another good one.
Yeah.
And there's sometimes like it honestly comes up, you guys. Like there's another guy that I realized that he was talking about living with his girlfriend. And so
which Christians are across the spectrum in that one.
Yeah. And so I was like, okay, this means something different to him than it means. And so I think a few dates in, I was like, hey, just so you know, like this is kind of where I stand on that. And it was just very much like, here, this is who I am and this is who I'm going to be. And
that's good.
And you're kind of like allowing them to be like, well, I'm not into that, you know? And you might actually decide, well, I'm not into like whatever your situation is over here. Like you're kind of both deciding that both ways. But I feel like more often than not, it comes up naturally.
Yeah, definitely. One that has been kind of interesting that has helped open up a lot of spiritual conversations is I'll say like, do you pray? Like,
nice.
I was like praying about this, like do you ever pray? Or like, what does prayer look like? Because prayer is really interesting because that's, your conversations with God. And so that helps kind of like explore a lot of different things. Or I'll even say like, oh, how do you like do you spend time with God? Or like, what does that mean to you? Like to spend time with God? Because then that could open up like devotionals, prayer, church. I go in nature, and then another one I've said is like, oh, do you like talk to God, or does God talk to you? And that is really interesting to hear what people say. Because some will be like, oh, God doesn't talk to me. Like, what? Like, but I talk to God. Or another one of my favorite ones is, I mean, it's up to you. Like, but I've been like, have you ever seen any miracles? Like, I was on a hike with a guy and I was like, you're like witnessed a miracle? Like, you ever seen anything like crazy? And it's so fun actually, because then you can get into some like cool God stories of like miraculous things. Like this person's like, no, I don't think I ever have. And then he was like, well, I almost got in a car accident and like we almost died, but somehow like we didn't, like. And then I was like, whoa, like as he shared, I'm like, no, that was like miraculous. Like
that counts.
That counts. You're in. That's a miracle. So, but then that like created like a really cool story, like, opened up more spiritual conversations. And so it's like it can be like the chillest thing. And I try to make it chill because I mean, it's like, we love God. We want to know that like people share that with us. But at the same time, it's like how you go about it of like, there's so many complexities. Like I've had people like go after like, how do you live your life with God? Are you going to church? And I get defensive, and I really love God and I really love church. But I'm like, if you're coming at me with this intensity of like, I'm going to figure you out and know if I really want to get to know you or not, then that my defenses are like, I'm not giving you anything. So,
your body just kind of automatically like shuts down when it feels like somebody's like coming at you and they're not just like being like genuinely curious.
Yep. Curiosity. That's
curiosity
honestly it.
Will just help you on any date. So
and
take it with you.
Interesting. Final thing, I guess, I don't know, is Jesus was really curious. Like Jesus always asked questions. Like Jesus didn't just like, obviously Jesus knew everything about everybody, but like he didn't come in, well, except with religious people, with like assumptions, but like anybody else, he would ask them questions. Like he would just he wasn't like, going after their throats. He was just like asking questions or healing them.
A lot of questions.
Or he'd be silent. Like he would listen, so he would eat food with them. Like he would just hang out and party. So there's a lot to learn of like how Jesus went about everything, that you're like, oh, like he was very curious. He was very curious about people's lives and he was very present, and he just did random life with them. Well, besides all the miracles, but
random life with like some miracles mixed in.
So Jesus will teach you how to date, and he didn't even date. He didn't even date. So there you go.
Wow. Yeah. That's your walk away with point there. Jesus will teach you how to date.
Jesus will teach you how to date. So there you go.
He is great at relationships.
Very connected.
Yes. A very connected man.
Very connected guy. So
okay, well, I think we're gonna wrap up unless you had anything else to add.
I hope Callie enjoys this podcast. We dedicated it to her. So
Callie is gonna correct our theology in the next podcast. So
exactly.
She wasn't here to do it now.
I loved this time with you, Dre, and I'm glad that I am the oldest child of your best friends.
My firstborn.
Your firstborn. So I'm glad for this one-on-one time with you as we're both like coughing. I think we both are like getting over sickness. But I'm going to be thankful for when Callie comes back.
Yeah, we miss you, Cal.
We miss you, Cal.
And all of you out there, we didn't miss you because we recorded a podcast, even though I'm sick and even though Callie's missing.
Hey, this was a great discussion. I felt encouraged. I was like, this is some stuff we care about. So it was good.
It was a good discussion.
It was a good discussion. So
thanks for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Okay, bye.
Bye.